Yesterday, one of the dominant news stories on both sides of the Atlantic was the announcement by the British Prime Minister, Theresa May, that she was postponing a much-anticipated vote on accepting a preliminary Brexit package that had been negotiated with the European Union. Her decision, unfortunately, continues the turmoil in her own party and Parliament at large about how to implement a referendum that was narrowly passed, instructing her government to leave the European Union that the United Kingdom joined 45 years ago in 1973. As a member of the U.S. Congress that is also divided and struggling with its own ability to execute basic functions, I have a great deal of empathy, as I'm sure many of my colleagues do, with the frustration that members of Parliament and the British public are feeling today. Fundamentally, of course, this is a domestic question for Parliament, and it would be presumptuous for elected officials from the outside to weigh in on the agreement's proposals regarding residency, immigration, visa requirements, and how health care coverage will be coordinated if and when the UK exits the European Union. However, there is one issue which myself and many of my colleagues from the U.S. have a very keen interest, and I raise it today in a friendly but firm voice, which namely the status of Northern Ireland under the Good Friday Peace Accords. Unfortunately, Mrs. May in her announcement yesterday indicated that was the one issue that her efforts to protect the Good Friday Peace Accords were going to be renegotiated and possibly dismantled. Mr. Speaker, I wish to remind the House that the Good Friday Peace Accords, which were signed 20 years ago, last April 10th, had the active and supportive involvement of the U.S. government and the U.S. Congress. The Clinton administration in the 1990s, at the invitation of the Irish and British governments, named former U.S. Senator George Mitchell as special envoy to Northern Ireland, and he chaired the all-party peace negotiation over a number of years, which led to the Good Friday Accords. His work, along with his successor, Richard Haass, were crucial to the success of the talks and the execution of the agreement. In the U.S. Congress, a bipartisan group of lawmakers, including our colleague Richard Neal of Springfield, Massachusetts, were frequent visitors and participants during the negotiations. And to this day, Mr. Neal and bipartisan members of the Friends of Ireland caucus, of which I am a member, continue to monitor the progress and success of the Good Friday Accords and are deeply, deeply concerned that Brexit, if it reinstates a hard border on the island of Ireland, will undo one of the great diplomatic successes of our time. Mr. Speaker, the successful results of the peace agreement cannot be denied. During the troubles which preceded the accords, over 3,600 residents of the 6 counties of the North lost their lives due to sectarian violence. 763 service members of the British government and the Northern Irish government lost their lives. To put that in perspective, 464 UK troops have lost their lives in the long war in Afghanistan. The economic results have also been undeniable. Mr. Speaker, I have a little bit of experience because in 1973 and 74, I was a student in England and spent the Christmas break in Northern Ireland visiting a fellow student in the town of Enniskillen. I took the train from Dublin to Belfast, and in the border town of Dundalk, where I was asleep, I was awoken by a British soldier, heavily armed, poking me to look at my backpack. While we visited in Enniskillen, there was a bombing in the village, and looking around, it was clearly a depressed economy because of the hard borders and because of the isolation of Northern Ireland. Fast forward, I took a trade mission from the state of Connecticut to Belfast 2 years ago, and Belfast is a transformed city. It is thriving, it is healthy, and clearly allowing the Northern Irish economy to participate both in the full island as well as Europe has had a beneficial effect. And that is why the people of Northern Ireland actually voted no on Brexit. So, Mr. Speaker, we are at a point today where the British government clearly has to make a decision about whether to preserve one of the great diplomatic successes which provides a roadmap for sectarian violence all across the world. Diplomacy succeeded in Northern Ireland. It is imperative that those in charge over there protect the hard-fought work and remember that there are stakeholders outside of England and Great Britain, including the United States government and the United States Congress, which have skin in the game and have investment in terms of the great success over the last 20 years. Protect the Good Friday Peace Accords. Protect the peace that has flowed from it. Protect the prosperity that has improved the lives of the people of both Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic and the world at large. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time. The chair.